Hello and welcome. I am live from Pelham's Wasteland, and today I have another episode of Pelham's Wasteland Reads for you all, this time covering The Red Knight by Miles Cameron. The Red Knight is the first in a book series of five, the Traitor Sun cycle, as it is called apparently. Miles Cameron is the name of the author, who is also the same person as Christian Cameron. Miles is used for the fantasy and Christian for the historical fiction. I've read a couple of historical fiction things from this author. I read the Tom Swan series. I did a video about them last year that you can find in the back catalog if you're interested in that book series, which I thought was quite good. This one I also think is pretty good. It's an interesting blend of different elements. This particular book, so I've read this one, and then I've actually, at the time of recording, already read the next book in the series. I'm not going to talk about that one in this review, but I'm probably going to do another video on the rest of the books, more than likely. Um, this one is interesting because it is, I would say, a little different than at least the next one, and we'll see how the ones after that go. But it is a fantasy story with a fairly gritty tone. A lot of the flavor of the story has to do with, the sort of realistic depiction of like weapons and armor and combat in particular. A lot of kind of realistic medieval elements, much more kind of grounded in history than a number of other fantasy stories are. And some interesting, a lot of the kind of fantastical elements on some level are sort of grounded in kind of like folktale versions rather than the you know common versions of some of these things that we might be more familiar with in a sort of generic like Dungeons and Dragons fantasy, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, it's pretty good. The titular Red Knight is the captain of a mercenary company who is engaged to defend a nunnery, a place called Listen Karak, and they are tasked with defending this place and do not realize just how desperate that defense is going to become. They end up involved in a major siege, and there's all sorts of stuff going on, both kind of within the nunnery and outside of it. Probably there's an interesting quality of bringing in a lot of secondary viewpoints. There are a bunch of characters who show up for, say, one chapter, maybe, um, and or even sometimes shorter than that, a short little bit of their viewpoint. And I think it is a complicated thing because at first it is definitely, I would say, a little distracting. There's parts, especially in the first half of the book, there's places where I'm like, oh, I really, care a lot more about some of the parts of this story more than others. That being said, in the second half of the book, especially as they all start to come together and we start to see kind of how all of the different plot lines are interacting with each other much more, that part is really fun and really cool to see that all come together, like I said. So that's seems to be one of the biggest things that people have commented on about this particular book is that there are a number of viewpoint characters, some of them with not very much time, but are sort of a part of the world. There's some other interesting things about the world. One of the kind of odd things is that this is a medieval fantasy world that is, as I mentioned, kind of closer to authentic kind of historical medievalism, including that all of these characters are familiar with Jesus and medieval Christianity and all of that sort of stuff. And I don't think that is bad by any means, but it is unusual certainly to have a secondary world that is not Earth and also have kind of planted wholesale within it um, these historical or semi-historical reality of um, medieval Christianity as it happened in our world. Um, so it's an odd thing. It is funny. I was pointing out, talking with friends online about this series, that there is a sort of authentically medieval element in that a lot of medieval literature itself, it will involve these kind of fantastic other worlds that knights end up in, and also, despite being this kind of strange distant land, everybody knows about Jesus and believes in all of the kind of tenets of medieval Christianity that would be familiar in the places where they're from. And there's a funny thing with that, and that doing that kind of thing in a story like this is sort of an interesting nod to that actual medieval literature and to some other secondary fantasies. William Morris, in particular, is an author who I like a lot, and his versions of kind of medieval romance have elements of that in these fantastical worlds that are seemingly not our own. He will have authentic medieval Christianity just as a part of it. So there's something kind of fun and unusual there. Certainly not something I would say that you see in that many fantasy stories. But, it certainly makes it easy to keep track of all of the religious beliefs of the characters in the story. Um, Otherwise, I thought this book was good. I liked a lot about it. The details of, especially kind of these kind of grounded and gritty details of medieval combat, all of this stuff that has to do with like how historically people actually fought and what might happen in a circumstance that is not historical but is sort of inspired by history. So, for instance, like how well does plate armor hold up against like a wyvern or something? Things like that are just inherently fun concepts in a fantasy story, and it's fun to see, especially I think the more kind of realistic grounded elements really set off the fantastical elements in fun ways, right? It's a classic thing that when plate armor actually like stops most weapons when you get hit by them, it's cool to see something that just like smashes through it because it's distinct, rather than like if armor doesn't really help you very much in combat, then when getting hit by like a huge club or something that smashes it apart, it's like, oh well, that's all the weapons seem to damage armor really effectively, it's not that different. So anyway, I thought that was well done. Reminds me a lot of the stuff that I liked from the Tom Swan series. That there's this, the mercenary commander who is trying to manage all of the different elements and trying to figure out what's best, and obviously the mercenaries under his command, uh, you know, have to trust him and his decision making, and a sense of trying to figure out how to uh, do their job with minimal loss of life, right? Things like that, trying to figure out just how much they need to be involved in the conflict. What does their contract actually hold for? And, the kind of clever ways that these characters are trying to engage with a difficult to survive in medieval world. So, yeah, that's pretty fun. I also really, I think that this series in particular does a really good job. There's a with the concept that I remember from another book that I've read, that I'm gonna butcher the specific quote, but it's something like um, a fight is a matter of adrenaline, a war is a matter of stamina. And I think that this book does a really good job of conveying that sort of thing, that there's, you know, high intensity action, swords out, trying to survive in a specific fight, but then there's also much more, long term issues, especially once the siege gets going. And there's the kind of, attempting to survive and not have it just be like a passive thing. I think that can be something that is hard to communicate Especially, certainly, I've read other fantasy books where there'll be like a siege happening, and it feels like all it is waiting around. And obviously, there's probably a lot of waiting around in a siege, but there's also, active things that are going on, and tensions that are fraying, and interaction between characters, and trying to understand, what can we do to maximize our odds of surviving the siege, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, all of that I think is really well done in this book in particular. The kind of active side of trying to survive a medieval siege, that is the moments of really intense, high stakes action, with some of the kind of lower stakes maneuvering and jockeying for positions and giving up specific ground versus trying to keep other ground, things like that. I think works really well in this particular series. So yeah, pretty fun, and I would say that I definitely recommend this one. I have not finished the rest of the series, but the next one is also good. I thought both of the first two books are a lot of fun, and a lot of things that I like in my fantasy in this one. So that, take from that what you will. Anyway, The Red Knight by Miles Cameron. It's 700 something pages, kind of a long one, but lots of fun, and especially I felt like the second half in particular is really the standout and is a lot of fun. So yeah, that is I think going to be all for that. So if you've read The Red Knight or the Traitor Sun cycle as a whole, feel free to leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I've been live from Pelham's Wasteland, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.